what do you think is the percentage of DNA or your genetic information that is shared between a rhesus monkey, a banana, and a chimpanzee? Right? So come up with a number in your head and keep that with you. With the rhesus monkey, we share about 93% of our genetic information. With the banana, it's 50%. I'm sure all of you guys are surprised because that's a lot of information that you share with a banana that we eat practically every single day. Chimpanzee, we share about 98.5%. Well, of course, that's not a surprise. We all know that were our super ancestors, right? Now, there are 4 letters that essentially codes our genetic information. So if you take the English language, we have 26 letters. Similar to that, the genetics has 4 letters, just 4 letters, the A, T, C, and G, right? So these are the DNA base pairs that makes up your entire genetic material. Now, if you look at the genetic code, so our entire body is made of trillions of cells, right? These are cells that makes up your skin, your hair, your internal organs, everything. Inside each of the cell, there is a genetic information that is placed. In each cell, you have more than 3 billion base pairs, right? So that's a lot of letters that writes up your genetic information. So this is the book, or this is the genetic code that tells your body how to function. So it's like the syntax your body has to do the programming that it needs to do. Each of this contains more than 25,000 genes, and this is a figure that just keeps growing because we're discovering more and more genes that we are not aware about right now. Now, we know that part of your letters, or small part of these letters, essentially makes up your genes, which are instruction manuals, right? So that is being given to you, that helps you understand what are the things that you need to do at various time points. And each of your cells knows which part of this genetic information that you require to use to do the function that we need to do. So it is a very complex mechanism that we definitely understand. Now, when we look at the human population, we know that 99.9% of our genetic information is the same amongst each one of us, right? So all of us here today on the call, 99.9% of our genetic information is the same. So what is that makes you different from the other person, right? So this is single genetic change, right? So we call this as single nucleotide polymorphism, or SNP. Essentially, in simple words, they are just 1 letter changes that makes us different. So if I were to just change a T and a C, I'm different from you, right? So we have many of these single nucleotide polymorphisms in the human genome, and that is what makes it unique and different from each other. This is the 0.1 variation that will essentially hold important clues for your traits, health, fitness, nutrition, drug response, right? So that's essentially what will help you have certain different unique qualities, but also sometimes bring in some of the health concerns that we may see in our own lifetimes. Now, when you look at chronic illnesses, right? So chronic illnesses is becoming a growing burden. I'm sure all of us have experienced this, unfortunately, either with our own lives or with our family members or our relatives. And we see that it's accounting for more than 74% of global deaths, which is a very big number and pretty scary. And these, of course, come from the WHO. Chronic diseases are essentially multifactorial. So what that means is, just like the jigsaw puzzle, it has various pieces, genetics being one of them, but there are many non-genetic factors. That includes your lifestyle, your family history, your environment, your diet, your exercise patterns, your behavioral factors, essentially. So major chronic illnesses are examples like your cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, cancer, chronic respiratory illnesses like COPD, diabetes being one of the biggest one, and India, unfortunately, being the diabetic capital of the world. All of these illnesses are multifactorial. So other than your genetic factors, many other factors that plays a role. So balancing these factors and risk factors becomes very important. So here's an example. Now, if you were to find that there is an individual who has a genetic risk factor, right, that is increasing the risk in the scenario 1, you essentially have the variant A, and that variant A is essentially increasing your risk of developing certain illnesses. This is a genetic risk. While the variant T does not increase your risk of developing that particular disease, let's say type 2 diabetes. Scenario 2, the same individual who has a genetic risk factor for type 2 diabetes also has obesity, has a very unhealthy eating pattern, and does not exercise. The risk further goes up. Essentially, this person may develop diabetes much earlier and a lot more severe. While the person T, who had a genetic variant that reduces the risk or does not increase the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, is also somebody who exercises and eats well. The risk of developing type 2 diabetes goes down. So either they completely mitigate the risk or they delay the onset to a much later time in their life. Now you have scenario 3, where the person who had the risk factor, the genetic risk factor for developing type 2 diabetes, is somebody who is aware about it and they make some lifestyle changes where they start exercising, lose weight, start eating healthy, and reduce the sugars. They start reducing the risk of developing the disease and they start pushing the onset much later in their life, as compared to the person who may not even have a genetic risk factor but has an unhealthy lifestyle and ends up developing the disease. So, balancing your genetic, non-genetic risk factors can actually help you manage and mitigate the risk of developing these diseases. What is important is being aware about the genetic risk factor because that can help you manage the non-genetic risk factors here. So, unlocking the power of your DNA essentially would help us predict, prevent, and also personalize a lot of these recommendations. So, many things that we do in terms of your diet and lifestyle right now are not personalized, especially to your genetic makeup, and they are just based on a set of recommendations that are general for the entire population. So, first step is to predict the risk of developing some of these conditions. So if I were to look at a population of 100 people, of those I want to understand how many of these have a medium or an increased risk of developing a disease versus the people who do not have that risk. So first segregate ourselves and identify what is our risk of developing the disease. That is where our genetic tests can come in. Second, what it helps you do is to prevent some of these conditions or mitigate the risk. So how do we do that? One is early screening. Second is early intervention. Third, it also helps you reduce your overall healthcare costs, which are very important in today's day of life. And then personalize. So we have a group of board certified genetic counselors who help you personalize and make an actionable plan that will help you understand how do you modulate your non-genetic risk factors. So your diet, lifestyle, screening, in order to reduce the risk of developing these conditions or delay the onset. The screening is also a very important tool. So instead of doing a random set of blood tests that will give you a bunch of parameters, you want to be able to screen more specifically and carefully. That is looking especially at the conditions where you have a genetic risk factor. So as I said, we have genetic counselors on board who help us understand what these test results are. So what are the implications of these, not just for you, but also for your family members. And especially what we do is interpret all of this with respect to your personal history and your family history. So we also suggest what are the preventative steps or screening management that we can do in order to reduce the risk of developing these conditions. And we also help you make that actionable plan that can help you then go back to your doctor and then discuss this further in terms of implementing a lot of these action points. So I'm introducing one of our most comprehensive tests called Genome Patri. Genome Patri is essentially a genetic risk assessment for a lot of these chronic illnesses, wherein you understand the predisposition to traits, carrier status, drug responses, as well as all of these chronic illnesses. And it helps you figuring out a proactive, preventative, and a personalized measure in order to reduce the risk of developing these based on these SNPs or these genetic variants that are present. We cover more than 100 conditions in one report, and it looks at various things, including nutritional deficiencies, your muscle performance, respiratory diseases, diabetic health, cancers, cardiovascular diseases, neuropsychiatric conditions, and also pharmacogenomics. So it's a very comprehensive report for anybody who's looking for an overall health perspective to understand what their future would look like, and especially when you're worried about, what your current diet, lifestyle, or your family history might be contributing to this. So this is how a Genome Patri looks like when you see the report. It lists out if your risk is medium or high based on a calculated risk on the genetic variants that we identify. And based on that, we'll have a post-test counseling call where we kind of help you interpret all of this information and make sense out of this report. So if you look at a customer journey, essentially from the time that you've placed an order or you have ordered for a test online, or you will receive a sample, you'll receive a kit at home wherein this is a simple buccal swab, so it can be done by yourself. Nobody else has to administer this for you. It's not a blood sample collection. It's a simple buccal swab wherein you just have to rub the sides of your cheek. It's very painless and non-invasive. The kit then is shipped back to our lab, and in the lab process takes a couple of weeks. Once the genetic report is ready, we then have a post-test genetic counseling call, and then you receive a second report that will give you this plan of action, and you continue doing monitoring your health, as well as that which hopefully helps you prevent some of these conditions or help you in an early detection. And the eventual outcome is that we want to make sure that you're healthy and you are taking care of yourself and minimizing the risks of developing many of these conditions.
I recently found out that through my relative that one of them she has been recently diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, right?
Mhm.
And the doctor said she has a genetic disposition to it from my mother's side, right?
Okay.
So if I through this genome patri test that you showed, if I do this test, so this test will be able to tell me that I have such genetic predisposition to these kind of cancer, and what are the things I can do to avoid? Will it also tell me what are the things I can do, or what are the stuff I need to consume to avoid such fate in the future?
So Abhishek, there are two types of cancers that we generally see, right? So if you look at all the cancers, let's say there are 100 people who got cancers, 5 to 10%, so 5 to 10 people of those 100 people who got cancers would have an inherited genetic change, meaning this is a genetic change that is running in a family that increases their risk of developing the cancer. So these are folks wherein there is a different kind of genetic change that you're born with, and that already puts you at risk of developing some of these cancers, which are early onset or rare cancers like pancreatic cancer. So cases like these, we actually offer a diagnostic testing because this is a different set of genes. See, when you're looking at something like genome patri, these are common variants, which is predisposing or increases susceptibility, but it's not 100% risk, right? Because there are many other non-genetic factors as well. However, when the 5 to 10% of people who have these rare cancers or familial cancers, as we call it, that increases, that is essentially causing that particular cancer. So what I would recommend in this case is to evaluate your relative first. So the best person to be tested in families like these is the person who actually developed the cancer first, because if there was an inherited change, then we identify that in the person. Then we offer testing for that particular gene and variant in the unaffected relatives who are at risk. So like your mother or somebody else who's the first degree relatives, and then going from there, whoever is positive, there is usually a 50% risk that their first degree relatives, like their siblings or children, might inherit the same genetic change. So in cases like these, what we do is we first counsel the family and the patient, like we make them first chart down their family history, personal history, understand the likelihood that this could be running in a family, and then offer appropriate testing to the affected person. Only in cases where the affected person is not living anymore or unavailable, then we offer the testing to an unaffected relative. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So the genome patri looks at common cancers like your prostate cancer in males, breast cancer in females. Pancreatic cancers are usually rarer, although we do cover that in our genome patri test as well. The family history that you are suggesting right now requires a different type of genetic testing.
What is that test called?
So it's a diagnostic test. It's usually like a hereditary cancer panel. It's a different diagnostic test that we do, right? So you and I can connect more later on if you want to. I can leave my email address on the chat box, and we can connect later to schedule an appointment and we can talk more about this.
Sure.
So somebody asked a question about chronic illnesses being caused due to food intake. Yes, a lot of the chronic diseases are unfortunately because of the food that we take, or the unhealthy diet that we may particularly have. Right. So the idea here is to understand if there is a genetic risk factor and you're adding your lifestyle and your diet, which are completely preventable, then you're just continuing to increase your risk. So if while we can't change our genetics, we don't have that mechanism, you can change your lifestyle and your diet. But the first thing is to be aware about the risk and to be aware about what are the unhealthy diet and lifestyle changes.
Mr. Reddy, I have a few questions. Since I handle a lot of clients who take up this genetic test through you, so people ask us these questions like, suppose I have this many risks now, I have undergone the consultation, counseling has been done, I'm gonna do the lifestyle changes. Can I take the test again in 6 months? Will they show any changes? this kind of
It does not show a change. Yeah. So even though, see, these are genetic changes that we are born with and we'll have it for the rest of our life.
Absolutely.
Right. So it will not show or reflect a change. There are other things that are dynamic and that we see changing. One is your gut microbiome. You do see your epigenetics, which is the reflection of your environmental lifestyle and diet on your genetics. These are things that are dynamic and they tend to change based on your changes in your lifestyle or your diet or your exercise patterns, because that is dynamic and that will reflect a change. But this is something that is constitutional, meaning you're born with it, you have it for the rest of your life. So all these three systems are parallel to each other, right? So this genetic risk will be there, it will always be there, but the effect of that will vary based on everything else you do.
And what could be the ideal age to take up this test? Many people do ask us, like, I'm in 20s, should I take or shall I wait till my 40s to understand my genetic risk and everything?
I would say the earlier the better, because given the current state of our work and the how hectic our lives have become, I think all of us, especially I see that I've seen people right in the 20s to into the late 60s doing this, but then what I see is the major transition tends to happen right after your 20s, right? When you are, and that is also the time where you seem to have more time in your hands to start focusing on your health. And that is also the time where people start thinking about finances and how much you want to put in into your health and not put in into your health. So I think that's a good time for people to start looking at this, because you're more proactive and there's a lesser likelihood that you're actually affected with the disease in your 20s and a better chance that you are able to avoid it in your 30s and 40s. So I would always say the earlier the better. Of course, this is meant for adults because these are adult onset conditions. We do have different kinds of tests that are designed specifically for children. So that is a completely different set of tests that we do.
Many people do also say that, the results are so scary. I mean, they see so many risk factors are always being highlighted and everything. So they say, like, I'll not go for the counselings. But we do encourage, like, to understand the, how susceptible you are to this kind of diseases and all. Like, we have clients asking us, like, it shows vitiligo for me, the risk is high. So what exactly is this? Like, I have no relationship with this kind of issues, not even in my family. So we don't answer this. We definitely try to put it across to the genetic counselors as much as possible. But yes, people find it a little skeptical to take up the consults and everything.
Well, that's more reason why they should come into the counseling, because we are in a way, we're very unique because we make sure that we offer the genetic counseling with the report. And the reason for this is to make sure that they are clear about what this actually means. So having a genetic risk does not guarantee that you're going to develop that disease, right? It's not necessary that you're going to develop the disease. It's a risk factor. We have risk for so many things. So it is about understanding what the risk is and how do we manage it. And that's what we essentially do in the counseling. So please encourage them to come in for the counseling and discuss their factors. I would definitely say that, most people who come in for counseling are much more well adapted to the reports than the folks who don't come in, because they're not sure about what this actually means for them sometimes. Family history of Alzheimer's in a family, how lifestyle can help. So there's a lot of research around lifestyle and around diet that can help us mitigate a risk of developing Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. Again, in Alzheimer's, there are two kinds. One is the early onset, which tends to happen before the 50s. That is a completely different set of disease, right? Over there, the type of genetic changes are extremely different versus the late onset, which is the more common one, which you tend to see in most families, at least one or two people diagnosed with dementia, Alzheimer's in their 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s. So a lot of research has shown that omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids are very protective for your brain health, and that can help you keep your brain cells healthy. Cognitive reserve, essentially challenging your brain on a daily basis or challenging your brain to learn something new, is known to reduce the risk of developing dementia as we grow older. And then a heart healthy diet. So there are definitely many dietary lifestyle changes that are, researched, well defined and reported to reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's. At the end of the day, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's both are neurodegenerative. Essentially happens because our brain is degenerating or growing older, just like your skin and hair does. And that's a natural process of aging. So there's no 100% prevention, but there's definitely ways to reduce the risk that we have.
I have one last question. So this
Go ahead.
genetic testing is just gonna be once in lifetime, especially in
Yes.
terms of chronic diseases. There's anything else that which we can go ahead and do it next time? Many people do ask us, like, what else we can do it in
Yes.
terms of genetics.
Yes, so like I said, your gut microbiome, that is another important factor that plays a very important role in chronic illnesses like diabetes, weight loss, weight gain, as well as your inflammatory responses. Those are very dynamic. So many people present with symptoms of IBS, bloating, discomfort, or risk for obesity. And that is where we find that your gut microbiome plays a very important role. So that is where you might follow a diet or exercise pattern, do it for a couple of months, and then come back and redo your gut microbiome. And that would actually help make sure that you're able to, look at the shift in reducing the risk, or has it really helped or not helped, right? So the Genome Patri is looking at risks that are existing throughout our life. The gut microbiome looks at the current state of your gut and tells you what contribution does your microbiome or the bacteria in your gut give into these risks. And then there is epigenetics, which is a layer of the influence or the effect of your diet, lifestyle, environment onto your genetics, right? So that looks at biological aging, like how old are you really growing biologically as compared to the numerical chronological age that we have. And then how does the various systems work? Like how old is your muscular system, or how old is your, your cardiovascular system? So these three are very parallel systems. The epigenetics, which is the effect of your environment on your genetics, and your gut microbiome is very dynamic. That is something we definitely recommend repeating after a few months of a particular regime or a dietary pattern that you're making, or any lifestyle change that you're making. Couple who are in their late 30s or higher and planning for a child, yes, so there are genetic testing that any couple can take regardless of their age or family history. This is called a carrier screening. Essentially, these are for parents who are prospective parents or looking to have a child and want to understand other genetic risk changes that may get passed on from them to their children, right? So again, for this kind of genetic testing, we definitely recommend that you come in for a genetic counseling appointment. We discuss your personal history, family history, talk to you about what is this test, how do you go about this genetic testing, what are the pros and cons, and then walk you through that. And then we also see you again once your pregnancy is actually established.